All right, cyber traders, welcome on back here for another fantastic edition of our weekly workshop hosted simulcast inside our live trading room and, of course, on YouTube, Facebook Live, etc. That being Traders Talk. Great to see all of our students and members joining us here. And sincerely, actually, I was off yesterday and Friday. Great to be back within the market, but great to see our students like Margaret, Kathleen, Mark, Richard, Alex, Chuck, had Jeff and Scott just before as well, and a bunch more joining us right now. Again, we simulcast this inside our live trading room, so if you're not joining us there, perhaps you're on social media. At Cyber Trading U is the handle, not on webcam today. At least you don't have to deal with my ugly mug today. But otherwise, bottom left at Cyber Trading U on the social feeds right there. If you're not followed or subscribed to YouTube, namely, just hit the follow or subscribe button right there in red below, and make sure that you're caught up to speed with all of our live streams and workshops that we do. This workshop being Traders Talk, we conduct every Tuesday morning right here. So, with that said, oh man, I came back to a great day. I was just going over this with one of my students, so on a coaching call. So with everyone here, hey, on a day where actually start, let's put yourself back in the shoes of like a kid, like a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old running outside. Well, surely you'd be a bit more excited to go outside and play when it's 80, 85 and sunny and you see all your friends out there riding out there on their bicycles compared to, when it's like 35, 40 degrees outside and it's just raining, right? So think of it that way when it comes to opening up your platform and just scanning initially in pre-market. If you're at your desk when you should be at 8:30 Eastern, certainly no later than 9 o'clock Eastern each morning. Again, I commend anyone on the West Coast, any of my West Coast traders out there. You're up early. I appreciate you. Well, hey, you got to make sure you have the time to prep and look outside the window. Hey, is it sunny outside? And is it warm outside when you step outside? Or when you look outside the window, is it already raining and sleeting out? Like, shit, I know what I'm in for today. Well, hey, today I opened up my platform and I saw CLSK up another 14% compared to yesterday. I saw this ALT up a little bit. I saw so much up overnight. I mean, obviously there were some name brand companies coming off of earnings, Zoom being one of them. I actually took the time to focus on this a bit. Unity, this made a good dead cat bounce of all things. So there is just so much out there to try and capitalize on. All right. Well, you can't focus on too much, right? The more that we're focused on, the less we're going to be able to hyper focus in terms of the finer details of each trade, right? This is where I talk about this in more in phase one. You can only focus in on just 2 or 3 stocks really going into the open. All right. Well, what 2 or 3 stocks was I focused on going into the open? Well, to be transparent, although I was out yesterday, so to say, I had my ear to the market quite a bit yesterday, right, Rich? So, Rich and I were talking all throughout the day yesterday, and just a couple stocks I had my eyes on and I had my levels drawn for already. Like yesterday, last night, I drew levels out for a couple different trades. ALT was one of them. CLSK for any of my Bitcoiners out there. Bitcoin's up 45 to 46% since we called out that dip around 39.5. We are crushing. And the same to be said on CLSK and Mara. All right, well, CLSK, I, plotted levels for going into the day today. Did I trade this one, in fact? No, I did not trade, CLSK at all today. Maybe I will later. But, it's just to say I'm starting off on the ones that I took the time to plot levels for. So that is where I will start off with you on this ALT trade. There were other stocks that we had on our pre-market list. There were other stocks we had on the morning watch list that I also, traded and took the time to follow. Don't get me wrong. We'll get to BBAI. We'll get to SOUN. We will. NCLH if we got time. That was a great trade too, right? And just missed that before with Larry on our coaching call because it was already over our level and you just don't want to chase it. That's fine. All right, well, on a trade like ALT, I already had my levels set on this trade. And point being is that Rich made a very timely call out here at the time, my colleague Rich in the chat, right as it was breaking higher here. And once I turned over to it, I said, this is already over 12 and it's on the way up towards my next level here. Okay, let's focus in on this trade. Could this be a good move? Could this break above resistance and keep going? Well, the way that we play out a trade like this is simply to say, the first test of a key resistance typically is going to be the best test. So I'm waiting at first here to see this try and false break, nip and nod a little bit at first. But the more times it tries to do that, then I'll be interested in taking that entry. So when Rich had called this out, I took 2 entries on this trade, the first of which I took a break even on. I got in right off at 12:30 at first. Things were looking pretty dynamite, like really good at first. But if it's not going to make that higher high, if it's not going to make that big push up, just be prepared. And this stock, although I was a big fan of it going into the day today, it's not really an easy one to trade. It has some thin liquidity out there on the order book. It wasn't necessarily easy on the eyes in that sense. So by the time this pulled back towards 12:30, I took like 2 cents on it. Maybe it was a break-even trade. Got out before it shook lower here, so I felt good before it shook down. I was like, oh, okay, good. So I turned away for a second. I'm focusing on another trade at the time. And then I come back because I'm just expecting this to pull back more. You always want to confirm. Once this breaks down here, it's like, okay, well, if that was such a big level, then probably should just continue to drop, right? 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 And it never did. It never continued to drop lower. So I turned back to this trade as it was pushing back up and up towards this 12:30 line again. And that's where I said, you know what? If it's not going to make that complete drop like I was expecting, like I should be thinking, then maybe there is room for one more entry because, hey, this was a pretty clean level from yesterday's trading. There was a bunch of volume yesterday in the morning session, I think even in pre-market, that got traded and filled right off that 12:30. Well, the more and more volume that gets traded there, I'd imagine something's got to give. So by the time it pushed back over 12:30, that's where I'm in on this trade right now from. And from 12:32 and half penny right there. So I took half my trade out by the time this pushed up a little bit higher here, just to take profit. It was at like 13.25 or so. I took half the trade out when I was with Larry on our coaching call before. Normally, hey, just like I ask of us here, Margaret, Kathleen, and Alex, all of us in chat right here, well, what time do we normally see reversals happen? 10:15 to 10:30, the time frame, right? So I felt pretty comfortable just taking half my trade out right there because of time and because, hell, that's a 90-cent push. I'm very satisfied and very accomplished with 90 cents. I would have been satisfied with 60 cents. I'm just taking it level by level, though. So by the time it bursted over 13, I guess maybe I could have raised my stop up to just say under 13. Would have worked out perhaps even better, but I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be happy at the end of my trade. You know what I mean? So I'm still in on half of this position right now. Well, why am I still on half? Well, like I said, I'm pretty satisfied right now either way. So the more this pulls back, I'm sure I'll just hit the eject button. But this is what I'm thinking. And I went over this just earlier in the audio commentary. I was alluding to it, saying that there was a pretty interesting trend line looking at the long term on this. Really starting from 2020. I mean, this was a COVID stock that we traded back in 2020. I think that if they weren't vaccine, they were antibody testing company, blah, blah, blah. All right, well, pop and drop back then, pop and drop back in 2022. From this peak to this peak we'll start with, it's right now just breaking above this trend line again. So is there a case to see a real higher high? Is there a case to see this try and move up towards this peak that we had, right around 17 or so? I mean, I guess anything's possible, right? So I'm not waiting for that. I'm not expecting that by today, by tomorrow, by whenever. But it's just an interesting long-term trend line that you see getting retested and broken over. And even if you want to make it off this peak here, okay, well, there's some room to get up towards there, right? All right, so you're saying there's a chance. Let me ask us here, outside, even bigger, larger than just dollar levels, even more than just dollar levels, folks, for Sam and Margaret, all of us here, what are even, stronger increments or levels than just dollar levels? What's like the next leg up from there? Sam saying $5 and $10. Yeah, well, 5 then, right? 10, right? So absolutely. So like 5, right? So let's think of 5. All right, well, what's the next like $5 level above where it's trading at right now? 15. Okay. So that's a more psychological, abstract price to focus on. That's where we're more likely to find iceberg orders over time on trades. And, well, hey, what do you know? 89, 90,000 shares. Been out there since, I don't know, the start of the morning, the market open. As long as this stock continues to make higher lows from here, folks, could I ask us a very, basic question? You might kind of scratch your head and be like, what the hell is he going from here? What's 2 plus 2? What's 2 plus 2? Certainly not 5, certainly not 3, right? It is 4, and you should be extremely quick to answer that, right? There should not be anything but confidence behind answering that question, right? Because we've learned that across our entire childhood into adult life, basic mathematics. All right, well, here, as long as we're seeing higher lows continue to build, I'd like to say that there's a pretty strong chance that we can get closer, at least closer towards 15. Maybe it doesn't touch it exactly, but where it's trading at right now, I feel like there is a case to see at least a bit higher of a move up. We have this big iceberg level showing from level 4 from the heat map there. I'm sure it would be on NASDAQ Bookviewer there too. 15 typically is a psychological level to begin with. On top of that, it's still underneath where this trend line is off, the last 3 to 4 years. So again, not guaranteeing it. There's nothing guaranteed behind trading, folks. But as long as this stock continues to show higher lows and continues to show good direction here, then I'd like to think there's a case to see a better push towards it. So if this pulls back coming up here, then I'm in from a great price from where we called it out, right? So, that's the difference behind a good entry and a trade that you're jumping in late on or even chasing, even just before NCLH. All right, Larry, we didn't miss too much, man. So, Larry and I turned over to this NCLH trade when it was like basically here at 1850. We identified 1837-ish as a key level, or like right before it continued. So we were late to the party here. We were late. If we were, turning over to the stock as it was moving up towards this price, we would have been a lot more reactant. But that's not life. And we were, a little late to this trade, and it moved up more without us. Okay, so be it. It is what it is. See what happens at the next level, or maybe that resistance can flip into support. On a pullback here, who knows? Maybe we could see this pull back to support at 1837, 1840-ish, and this could become support over time, right? So that's where I'll tell you as far as just seeing a stock move up more and more and more without you. If you don't have a clear level to enter from, then you really just shrug off any type of emotion that may come behind missing that trade and just move on to a different stock. Trade like BBAI here still holding at the highs. There's other trades out there that we could look for a bounce. Even now, as I turn over to one of the stocks I took the time to prep going into the day, CLSK. Okay, let me ask us here really quick, and I'll get to your question next, Sam. But from all of us in chat, what do we nickname green as on time and sales? What do we nickname green as on the tape? Not the legal name. My legal name, Joshua Max, but my nickname, Josh. Well, the nickname for green is buying, right? As Mark and Sam both say, absolutely. All right, well, I took the time overnight to plot different levels for this chart, and I have a big fat green line here, if anything. I have two, but this is a big fat one. I'd like to think that there was a lot of buying at this price, 2035. Is it possible that for as much buying as we have here, that we could see it make the bounce coming up? 100%. For as much as this dropped off already, I mean, perhaps we could see a reversal now, if not from even earlier, we could have. So, this could be an opportunity. Just make sure it does what you need it to do. Under and over, you could set your stop right in from this point, and that sets up an entry. It sets up a thought, a possibility behind taking a trade. SOUN. This chart looks quite messy right now. Let me just delete one of these lines right there. Hey, at $7, there was a good case to see a pretty good entry on this trade. I missed out on this myself. It moved up without me at the time. But it ended up beginning to push over 7 and led to a good squeeze. I was already on to a different trade. So by the time I turned over to this, maybe someone else had jumped in on this stock and I didn't. Point being, on such an active day like this today, don't beat yourself up if you miss out on one trade and it's going up without you. Hey, if there was a clean level that you were watching and the stock had the time to break over that level and you were in the moment and missed it point blank, then that's something that you and I should need to take the time to talk about on a coaching call, on Traders Talk here. We can go over that a lot further. Otherwise, more one-on-one gives you the chance to kind of pick my brain further and realize, all right, what am I really thinking out on a trade like this? Even just before with Larry on our coaching call, which one was it? I think it was the CXAI, right, Larry? We were looking for a bounce on this trade, and he was telling me, it's like, typically it's this time of the day, like right where my chart is, where if he sees it going up, he'll feel more inclined to jump in. I get it. Hey, you might see the opportunity, the light in a lot of these trades where you think, okay, it's going to go up more. All right, well, if it breaks over the next big level and that gets flipped into support, I don't even mind taking the trade from a higher price. But I don't want to take a trade in between levels. It's like inception. It's like limbo, right? So what happened on this trade was, thankfully, we didn't have to take it from the higher level. It just kind of naturally pulled back. And I tried taking the trade here before we started Traders Talk, but it did stop me out just before as we began. If it's not going to make that larger bounce that I wanted, then the more it nips support over time, then maybe it does just tank. So that's where, at least, hey, for that break over resistance, the first test is typically the best test to see support. So, that's where even on NCLH, if this does pull back, keyword if, but if it does pull back towards 1835 to 1840-ish, for as much buying as we had from the morning session there at the open, perhaps that could initially become support. I'd like to think it would. These are things that we need to think of when we're in the moment, especially after missing out on part of a run already. Even BBAI, to go back on this trade, this was the first one I took the time to really sink my teeth into. So, before I missed out on SOUN and before I missed out on, even the HIMS trade, HIMS moved up without me at first. I took a loss on that, and then it popped without me, actually. Well, this one ended up providing an easy trade. And it was off of a couple of prices, actually a few, because you could even plot $3 here, and it made a pretty strong breakout afterwards. So just to kind of shuffle around a bit, if you look in the chat board inside our trading room, this is where we encourage anyone on social media to join us just live day to day. Right at 9:30 in the morning, I wrote to you, 9:31 if you want to be exact, BBAI print 270. What that means is that the opening bell print got filled at 270. So over time, this ended up pulling back under it. And then shortly after holding under it for 2 consecutive bars, it pierced back over it, right? So as soon as it broke through that big level on the way up, it promoted my entry on this trade. I was messing around with this in pre-market. So it was like a -1 or -2. I call it break even. It did tack on to my first actual loser I had in pre-market this morning. So, that was at 280. Well, if you missed it from 270, for as clean of a level as 280 was, the more it nipped it and broke over it in a shorter time frame, you got that next leg. You got that continued move up. Same to be said at 3. First test of resistance here, best test of resistance right there. But the more it nips and gnaws it in a shorter amount of time, I'd like to think that we can get that larger reactionary move, not just a move that's worth 10 or 12 pennies worth. Like this down. This is either going to reject 3 tremendously and tank, or it's going to break over 3 pretty hard and make a much better move than the consolidation under it. So easy to say that after the fact. Over time, this ended up slowing down anyway, as you should expect. But during prime time hours, all right, I'm calling out one level at first, and if I miss that move myself, doesn't mean I'm missing out on the trade entirely. But if it provides an opportunity for me to get in from the next level, then I will take it from there. To go back actually once further, aha, look at this, nice bounce on my CLSK, big buying from 2035, right? That's what we just said beforehand. All right, well, if there's so much proverbial buying there, I'd like to think that we should get a pretty big move up, right? Notice that that was the closing bell print, in fact, from yesterday. It says close at 2035. Interesting. Well, to go back to yesterday's move more so, I was watching this trade yesterday. I was watching this right out the gate yesterday morning. These levels that I have plotted here, I took the time to plot yesterday morning, these levels here. And right out the gate, this freaking thing was so strong. I was glued to this trade at 9:30. I was ready to try and jump in, but I did what I tell you I do. I don't bullshit with this rule, folks. I mean that just very bluntly because I want you to realize that for what I tell you, I'm doing myself. You know, if you're risking tens of thousands of dollars on a trade and I'm risking tens of thousands of dollars on a trade, I'm going to do what I tell you that you should do, right? And that means to wait the first 5 minutes. So it was a shame when this took off instantly right away without me. It was 9:31. It just popped right away. And you know what? This took off so damn fast that I just said, you know what? If it's not going to pull back and hit me at those green lines there, at least, or the 17 line there otherwise as support, then let's just see what else is out there. I don't mind moving to another stock as long as there's another stock that I feel comfortable trying to sink my teeth into. Especially the more this pushes up and up and up and up. All right, maybe I could take it from the next level up. And in hindsight, this is easy to go over here because, again, I'm just mentioning this now. I didn't take this trade, but it looks like it first tested 18, rejection. And then just on the next couple candles, it broke it. So there was opportunity on this trade over time, but it's a matter of retest, re-break, right? So, just the difference between it is how fast the stock is, what time of the day it is, how much the stock has moved up already, over time. If we kind of look at SOUN here, this stock SOUN has been on fire of late. I mean, really dating back to the beginning of this month, it was a $2 stock, and then just back from Valentine's Day on the 14th, 226 close. It gapped up overnight, and then ever since. So it's not like this stock is only up 16% today and that's it, or it was up, like 30% or whatever today. This thing's been up like nearly 400% in the last month. So the more this stock goes up naturally on the daily chart, you got to imagine it's going to begin to pull back or for it to slow down, right? Hey, CLSK, I'm sure will have another down day or consolidation over time. This thing we've been on top of since October. This thing was like a $4 stock. That's 22. So, of course, it's going to slow down over time. But that's where I at least say, if there's a level that the stock is testing the first time on the day, looking at a day trade, all right, this provides a pretty clean entry in up to the next level out, perhaps. If you're thinking it could push up more, then maybe try and hold on longer. But, this right here even is like a 65, 70-cent trade. That's pretty solid to me for mid-morning. You know what I mean? 500 shares, that's, pretty solid pay to begin with, and that's even after the market open. Now, this ALT trade, we're just going to just look at really briefly here, just still holding those higher lows up to 14. Perhaps 14 could be a resistance, whole number, right? It could be. Don't want to discount it. But we had our eyes set on $15. That's where we had that 89, 90,000 share sell order. Let's take a look right now if we can. Even on level 3, we'll go to the NASDAQ Bookviewer here. Just launch the NASDAQ Bookviewer coming up right now. I might have to toggle this a bit. Hopefully not. Not too bad, not too bad. There we go. All right, what's showing here on level 3, the NASDAQ Bookviewer? Of course, I could show it on the TradeStation Matrix. I just like to show this because it gives a good comparison between the two. Well, I will say you have about 12, 13,000 shares here on the ask at 1398. No surprise, like very close to a whole number at 14. But at $14, there is only about 5,000, nearly 6,000 shares there. So maybe there's more volume that's actually through the other order book, through the EDGX, maybe the NYSE perhaps. Yeah, it shows about 23,000 shares total live right now. There's the 13,000 here at 98, and about 23,000 shares on top here at 14. So overall, about 35,000 shares, I'd say. All right. All right, Nicholas, there we go. Well, congratulations, first off. I'm always a lover, never a fighter or a hater, first off. I want to make that note. So I'm very happy for one of our trial members here, Nicholas, mentioning he got like 25 cents on it. And the keyword he's using, well, there's two. He says at beginner. So that's the first keyword. So he's recognizing, hey, I'm new to this. I'm just going to do this on, much smaller size. That's the second key phrase there. So, you know what? He traded this. He made 25 cents. Very happy, but he did it the right way. He did it on like super small size. Listen, as a trial member, put yourself in the passenger seat, and if you want to go on paper trading, demo mode, or if you want to do it on very small size like Nicholas did, then, hey, then go ahead, right? If you know how to set stops and you're doing a very small size, just playing around there, all good. I got off a few coaching calls with students that actually have took the time to buy and enroll in our classes. A couple of students that are not following what we're preaching as far as starting off small, trading in like 2,000, 5,000 shares, and they blew up their accounts. So, of course, I never mention name behind that, of course, right, folks? Whether it's male, female, whatever it may be. I don't mention that to you. But that's the reason why I always have to say, watch out, be careful. Don't make sure you trip yourself up too badly here because much like learning how to ride a bicycle, you're going to fall off at first. And then over time, you realize how everything works, the direction, the steering behind it becomes a little bit smoother, right? So, hey, I appreciate that from Nicholas. And definitely the more that you go through our actual classes, phases 1, 2, and 3 of our stock trading course, that's where I have a lot more time to break this all down. So coming up here, I'd even love to see this push higher continue, but you can never go broke taking a profit, right? Really quick, I got to go through emails here coming up in just a moment. Just, hey, for Traders Talk, we always advocate. If you have any questions you'd want to send over to me, please, first come, first serve. Early bird gets the answers. So Josh at C2 Trading is the handle. But before we move forward from ALT, Sam is asking what's the news out on this stock. So let me actually just double check that. I know this stock is like a high short float stock. There's a lot of shorting behind this stock, so it could be a squeeze. Let's see. So from yesterday, I got a bunch of crap here, honestly. I don't really see any good headline right now, Sam. Let me just double check. Taking on toughest of rivals in the obesity drug, ring right there. All right, so maybe their most recent news behind the drug had to do with behind like, obesity, weight loss, maybe. That's what I'm thinking. But otherwise, it looks like just a very highly shorted stock. So the more people that cover their shorts, you're going to get the squeeze. Easy to say that kind of after the fact. But this stock was one of the stocks back during COVID that took off, and it was for that reason. And ever since, well, if it's up in the pre-market, we'll look at it. It's kind of similar to like Novavax and VAX. That's also a very heavily shorted stock. I mean, outside of the vaccine stocks, you could just talk about the AMC squeeze back in 2020, right? Or 2021 that was, and GameStop. So for these stocks that are highly shorted, don't hold your breath waiting for them to squeeze. But if there's a morning where they're up big in pre-market, then obviously treat it as a day trade. And then if it ends up showing better strength the next morning, then you could put it back on your list. So in the event where this like was down 10, 15, 20% this morning, it wasn't. But if it were to have been, I wouldn't have been trading this today. It had a good day yesterday. It was up more from yesterday's close. So that's where I said, okay, well, maybe there's a chance for continuation, right? We're focused on the trend of it. So if this was like a one and done trade yesterday and it was like down bad this morning, we're not focused on that crap. It's like Lunar, LUNR. That's actually a great example. Speaking of a freaking short squeeze, you could say buy the rumor, sell the news, whatever. It's the same thing here, basically, up and down. And for as much as the stock popped up last week, well, obviously it's down now. Looks like this was a highly shorted stock as well, kind of looking from Benzinga. But once this ends up gapping down the next morning, to me, it's like, all right, let's find a new flavor of the day, new flavor of the week, whatever it may be, right? All right, so really quick, folks. Actually, let me just jump back to ALT just to keep track of my trade here. Also, really quick, CXAI, did this go back up? I got stopped out on this just earlier, break even. It's not really doing much, so it's kind of 50-50 this one right now, holding over VWAP. There's a case to see it bounce, but it's one of those like lower float stocks that, again, 50-50. So the first test of support, I felt good enough here, but after that, you got to see something more convincing to show up. Now, for emails, let me just jump through my email inbox. If there's any trades or questions that you wanted to go over from before, definitely send it over. Actually, a quick shout out to one of our platinum students, actually Charles Robinson. I know Fausto brought this up earlier. He was out today, and the next few days ahead, he's having knee replacement surgery. Actually, just had it earlier this morning, 7:30 Eastern. But he's on the mend right now, folks, recovering. So I know a lot of us were wishing him well, and he might be tuning in right now on YouTube. You never know. We simulcast this on YouTube as we do inside our live trading room. So wishing my friend Charles well here coming up. I'm sure he'll be back probably, if not by the end of this week, the next. All right, couple questions that came in from one of our new members here, Tim. So actually, I'll just go through these in order, Tim, and so it'll be pretty simple. So Tim asking, what is the theory behind the idea of, I'm sorry, what is the theory behind the idea that gaps will be filled? Well, the idea is to see like more people look to show buying or selling to have the stock continue its direction long term. So let's say in the instance, I don't have as much of a clean one to just give you here, perhaps. BBAI, I guess, for right now. Okay. Actually, you know what? How about this? Hell, we'll just go right to the SPY. We'll just go right to the SPY, speaking of gaps. Okay, so let's say if there's like bad news that comes out overnight, let's say if there's just selling in the futures market overnight, profit taking of any sort, well, overnight, you'll see the markets drop off. They'll lead to a bit of a gap. What leads to the gap potentially getting filled? Long-term direction. Long-term direction, right? So it's easy to say that the markets long-term have been trending up and have been continuing to, right? Now, if we even look here, we had a pretty strong gap up here over the last few days. Is there a guarantee that this gap will get filled and this comes back down the SPY towards 497, 498? Never a guarantee. Most gaps, typically you'll see over time look to get filled, but there's no time frame in which it does get filled, like whether it's right away or whether it takes weeks or months over time. Typically on the SPY, I guess tell you, the gaps do get filled a little bit quicker compared to, select equities. If there is like a stock that has a major gap on the daily chart, either some really good news came out or some really bad news came out. So in the event where there's like really bad news that came out, typically you're not going to see as much bullish sentiment, right? So at least in terms of the stock market and the SPY, the ETF behind the S&P 500, it's easier to say looking at the longer term trends on any gaps that we've had downward, they've filled back up pretty quickly. But let's say like on a stock, you could even say, I like this one over time. ARDX, I've shown this historically for like 5 years now, probably more. Let's even go back like 10 years. So back from, I think, 2018, was it? Nope, 2021. Losing track of my years. But this stock came out bad news back in 2021, and it took a long, long time for this to try and attempt to fill the gap. And over time, it, I think, did. Yeah, it did, and then some. If it's now above where it was trading back then in 2021. But when you look at that type of big gap overnight, that could present an opportunity on the given day. Like on this day where it gaps down and it's trading the next morning at like freaking $2. Well, put yourself in the shoes of someone that shorted this stock at 8. Let's say you short this stock at 8. Let's say a week goes by, or even just overnight, you wake up and the damn thing's at 2. Yeah, I'd like to think that you'd look to get out and take your profit, right? You'd cover your short. Because how often are you up that much on a trade just like that, right? So you take the money and run. Well, for as many people that were short on the stock, the idea behind the gap fill is like All right, well, maybe you're going to see enough people cover short to where it leads to a potential short squeeze for a bit, a dead cat bounce, synonymously known as, and the stock may, keyword, may look to potentially fill part of the gap, not to guarantee nearly most of it or all of it for that matter. As much as I say that, of course, I'll show you some anomalies here. Children's Place recently had a crazy gap down on the daily chart. Well, this day would have been a great day to attempt the gap fill or dead cat bounce as a day trade. But you'd like to think that, well, if the company had bad earnings, whether it's lowered guidance or whatever the hell it is, I wouldn't be expecting such a clean fill right away. So, like, it's good for this first day, but this stock over exceeded what we would expect for it to do. You know, it exceeded its expectations, where it obviously filled the gap, and then it continued where, well, for anyone that was still short on the stock, they got destroyed. So you can't judge a short squeeze before it happens, and as it happens, you're never going to be 100% with guessing it because most don't look to make this type of squeeze as you're seeing. So again, just to go back, like this one day where it gapped down on February 9th, oh, that could have been a great day to try and long it, try and, fill part of the gap, a little dead cat bounce. Maybe the next day, I reckon, but I wasn't interested. I remember I was very surprised the next day where it moved up even more. So, Snapchat, this has not filled its gap yet, right? If you're a longtime student of CTU, you've heard me say, I think Snapchat sucks as a company. So I was not jumpy to try and long this at all. I'm happy I stayed away. Personal interest obviously comes involved with some decision making. What we have from today, we had Unity. This did fill the gap. This had a great one actually from this morning. So this one was down big overnight. And at least as far as the intraday move it had, well, it dropped off at first, but it then made a bounce, right? So if you know where the levels are on the stock, looking at level 3, looking at level 4, the chart obviously could, show you some things looking at just the 1 minute, 5 minute chart like this. Resistance became support. Those things could help you out. Again, though, we say typically reversal time is around 10:15, 10:30. So something as simple as that could lead you to say the more this pushes up, you'd like to think over time it's going to pull back. And look what happened, like right on the nose here, basically, maybe 3 minutes off. 3 minutes off from 10:30, right? So 10:30-ish, that hit its reversal time, right back down. Question 2 from Tim, really quick. There's a few that came in, so just to answer the next one from Tim. Does the value of an ETF, whether it's equities or index, reflect the value of the underlying components, or does it reflect the supply and demand of for the ETF shares themselves? The latter, Tim, the latter. So, hey, the value of an ETF represents most specifically the value of the ETF. So let's just say, for instance, SOXL, SOXL, right here, chip ETF. I don't know the percentages, the breakdown component-wise as far as NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, Micron. I don't. But this is the chip ETF. So whenever we see stronger moves on at least the market, we'll try and focus on this because at least representing an entire sector, it's $40 right now, $41. That's still not too expensive as much. And back in January, December time, it was really cheap. So this has been a nice ETF that we've at least called out here and there. But keep in mind that when this moves up, it's not proportionate to AMD or NVIDIA. And on the flip side, there might be news for NVIDIA that pops that 15, 20%, like we had with earnings last week. Whereas, hey, SOXL had a pretty good move with it, a gap up with it, but it wasn't up as much nearly percentage-wise, right? And if it was, maybe it could be because it's triple leveraged. ETFs could be leveraged, 1.5 times, 2 times, 3 times typically. So this being a triple leveraged ETF, I mean, maybe it could have been up, nearly as much percentage-wise when NVIDIA had their earnings, but that would be the only reason why. To answer your question, Tim, the value of the ETF reflects the value of the ETF, meaning it's not that 100% direct to the underlying components, but it's similar. It's similar. So let's say at least if you trade or I'm sorry, let's say for instance, you hear me call out AMD. I'm like, oh, look, AMD moving up, moving up. All right, well, if SOXL has a pretty solid trend, and if it's showing good momentum, the type of momentum that we've seen it carry on good days, then perhaps we could be more jumpy to try and follow it. But if it's not really showing the type of momentum that we've seen it trade before, then I won't be as jumpy to follow it. So you have to gauge it, right? And that's a whole separate conversation I could talk to you on, like on a coaching call. Again, we don't really advocate for really most of our students to be following these ETFs at first. Really, if you have level 4, if you have Bookmap, that is, makes it a little bit easier on the eyes to do so. But, if you're a trial member or a new student, whichever you may be right now, Tim, that's where I'd say just stick more on equities versus ETFs to begin. Rajan saying, but ETF don't allow margin, need more capital. Yeah, but they're already leveraged to begin with. Like this is triple leveraged. So let's say if there's a stock, like in a general sense at least, outside of outlying factors like news, if AMD, Nvidia make a move up, this will make a larger move percentage wise on a usual day. But if there's news behind one specific stock, then I'd rather just trade that. All right. Now, there's one more question from Tim. And again, if you have any other questions, folks, just feel free to send it in via email or private chat right now. Just let me know. But otherwise, last one from Tim here. And if there were follow-ups, Tim, that you had, definitely let me know otherwise. This one is very important because this one is a common sentiment that I hear from trial members and especially new students once I begin to work with you, just in coaching one-on-one, whether, Jill or Jason or Lee or, a lot of our, recent gold students, maybe not brand new, but, Rhonda, Regina, I hear from a lot of us that, hey, this could be pretty fast moving at times, right? And especially as a new student where you need to train your eyes to interpret what, where. Think about that. You need to train your eyes to interpret what's going on at a certain portion of the day, at a certain portion of the screen, meaning I'm not looking at like, every part of my screen as intently right now. Really, I'm watching the chart. I'm watching level 3, which to me is on the far right side of my screen right here. I'm watching this program. I'm watching my chart. That at least allows me to slow the pitch down a bit. There's a lot of crap on the screen, honestly, here. And yes, I need to keep this up because, well, they all have certain value to it. But in a general context, looking at this overall platform, there's a lot happening. A lot of windows, a lot of fast moving numbers, a lot of bright colors. So for Tim or anyone else that emails me and says, hey, everything moves so fast in this room, how and when do you pick the stocks to trade? It's a common sentiment. It's a common thought, folks. And as a trial member, we don't really expect you to learn this within a week, because if trading was that easy to just master within 1 week's time like that, I don't care if you have 30 years experience. We have traders that have 30, 40 years experience that find this relatively complex at times. So you need to go through our classes, go through them in a sequence that we have them set up in, right? If you just start off in phase 3, it's still going to be very fast. But the more that you go through these same motions, it becomes a lot easier to slow the speed of the pitch down. So to generally answer this question for Tim, I will right here, but it takes just really our entire phase 1 stock course initially to go through in order for you to have a much more profound understanding. So let's go back to ALT. Whoops. Let's go back to ALT. Okay. Everything moves so fast in the trading room. How and when do you pick the stocks to trade? We pick the stocks to trade early in the morning. But again, preparation and time is everything. If you get to your desk at 9:15 Eastern and you open up your platform, you're like, all right, let's just start trading. It's like, going into like, one of those like rodeos with like the bulls, like the PBR series, the bulls. It's like going inside those like, pits blindfolded and then taking off the blindfold, like, here you go, good luck. It's like going into a test without studying. I know a lot of us, myself included, obviously, are, well after college, graduate school. If anyone, listen, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, the brightest bulb of the bunch. I didn't go to graduate school, so I just did undergrad. That was it. Hey, even back then, you had to study your butt off in order to pass, right? I mean, if anyone was that smart to just go in cold and not really study one bit and go in unprepared, kudos to you. But To most people that would do that, you'd probably fail, right? Well, if you have the time to prep in the pre-market, then you should know where the levels are on the stocks that you're looking at. So not only should you have the time to prep up and make sure that you're there early and know where the icebergs are, but you don't want to overwhelm yourself. You don't want to focus in on, oh, 8 different stocks to work with for the day. Yes, we post our watch list. Sometimes we'll have 10, even 12 stocks on the watch list. We say every morning, and especially in class, we don't want you to be trading 8 or 10 or 12 stocks. Out of those group of 8 or 10 or 12, hey, focus in on 2 or 3. And truth be told, you should be doing that before 9 o'clock when Fausto comes on. If you're at your desk at 8:30, you should know what's moving at that point. You should be saying, "Oh, CLSK is up again, another 14%. Perhaps there could be a good trade on that. Oh, ALT is creeping up a little bit. It's like, oh, SOUN's moving up a little bit." And if you know this stock has a liquid order book and you know it's within your price range, and you see iceberg orders out there on level 3 or even more so level 4, then I don't want to have too many stocks to work with like that. Because the more that I have to work like that, then I'm not going to be able to hone in on the finer details of those trades. So if there's a few stocks that are like SOUN that I could sink my teeth into, that's one thing. But I don't want to overwhelm myself. So point being, it takes time for you to at least filter it out each and every morning and know what's moving or not. There are times where I'm interested in a stock at 8:30, 8:45 Eastern time, and by 9:15 the thing is tanking. I'm like, all right, well, if it's tanking, I'm just not going to really focus as much on it right away, and I might need to just cut my list down to 2 instead of 3. Or maybe there is another stock I'll try and set up for and make that third, whatever it is. And again, as a new member, well, it might even be difficult to follow 2 or 3 stocks. You might have to really train your eyes first to interpret just one stock at a sitting. And once you just get the basic fundamentals for support resistance taken care of, not to say that you're trading 2 or 3 stocks at a time. That's the last thing that you should be doing actually as a new student. But as a new student, at least juggle a couple at a time, like, in your arsenal, in your rotation. Okay, let's look at SOUN, see what it's doing. Let's look at CXAI, see what it's doing. There we go. It moved up without me there. How about that? So it looks like this actually made a pretty good move right there from that 250. But it's just that, hey, in pre-market, you have the time to set yourself up compared to now, where it's like smack dab in the middle of the day. It's like, okay, everything's moving now. Not everything is moving in pre-market. There's a lot of crap in pre-market that you could just eliminate, right? The market's opening at 9:30, a fixed time each and every day. So, hey, we trade pre-market. I traded this morning in pre-market with my student Manny on a coaching call. I started off negative, to be honest with you, and I worked my way up at least afterwards on BBAI, and then AL, took care of itself. But yes, we trade pre-market, but if you're not proactively trading pre-market and you're not like hunting for a position on a given morning, then what are you doing with your time? What are you doing with your time? You should be making sure that you're setting yourself up for the next 4.5, 5.5 hours of the day, the market open and beyond, right? So again, that's easy to kind of address here. It's easy for me to spit out right now. It's easy for you to nod your head and say, well, that makes a lot of sense. No disagreement there, right? But it's not as easy to just do in the heat of the moment. It takes sequence. It takes consistency of being here each day of the week. Not each day, but more days of the week than not. The more often that you're here, then the goal is for it to slow down a lot more and for you to be able to pick up on this a lot better, be more reactant, right? It's not easy to be reactant. That's why, like, when I teach class to any of our trial members that are looking to jump on board with us, I shoot straight, and I don't just say that to say it. I provide full transparency. Hey, I got stopped out on this trade right here as I started Traders Talk. I'm not in this thing right now. This damn thing is moving up without me. It's okay. Trust me. I don't need to look good like that. It's all right. There's other trades that we could try and follow. But the point being is that at least when it comes to following a trade, well, I'm as focused in on my rules as possible. And if there's a stock that is going to make a move that doesn't really comply with the rule set I'm using, then it's going to be tougher for me to just jump in, I'm not the type of teacher that would just be like, yep, you should have gotten in right here and you should have sold right. We're not Captain Hindsight. Come on. There's no need to be. So, the only reason to be would be to just show it as education. But, that doesn't help a trader out in terms of like going forward. What helps you going forward is the real transparency of, okay, well, hey, if I wasn't teaching a workshop right now live, guys, well, hey, this is more easy for me to say, but I'd be more reactant here to see this test support and maybe try it again. It's hard for me to juggle 18 things at once. You know what I mean? And it's hard for you to do the same as well. So that's where I say, hey, if there's a stock moving up without you, don't beat yourself up over it. There's other stocks out there that we could trade. There's other opportunities that we could try and focus in on, right? So it's not just saying that just to move on from one stock to another, but even here, we know that our next resistance on this trade, well, it's at $3. Just moved right up to $2.99, $3. Okay, well, the more it could at least try and break above that, maybe there's a case to see continuation. Maybe we could see support begin to build here from a lower price. There could be a new entry on this trade, point being. Same with NCLH. The more this kind of, either pulls back towards that green line, or maybe it does move up to 19 and pops that. Just we need to identify the levels first. I'm not just looking at a trend and then saying, all right, let's just jump in. Hey, if trading was that easy, right, none of us would be here. But that's where I say if there's a stock that's trending well, it's within my price range, has good order book, tight spread, good orders. Okay, well, where are the key levels? Are there even any key levels for me to use? There might be a good trend, but there might be no icebergs. The order book might look like crap. That doesn't entice a good opportunity for me. You know what I mean? ALT. Hey, we had resistance at 14. It showed a little iceberg there. We saw that before. If someone's not in this trade right now, there is a potential case to see a breakout over 14, continuation here. The more times it tests it, I'd feel confident of it at least. So, we've been testing it. And there's a real case. Point being is that we can't get caught up in the moment for missing out on one or two trades here or there. As a student, let's say if you're a student taking the gold course right now, phases 1, 2, and 3 collectively, you're working with us in the coaching program, everything. If you are consistently missing out on opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and you're watching the stock break over the level first, you're not even late to the party. You're just like watching it, and then it goes without you. Then you need to let me know that, and we have to work on that one-on-one, right? And I work with students one-on-one with that all the time. But that's a problem that we need to address. We need to nip that in the butt pretty quick, because if we don't, certainly we're not really going to gain confidence with trying to use strategy. And the whole point of this is to learn how to supplement our income, or at least replace our jobs altogether, right? Make money. Well, you have to feel confident to pull the trigger in order to do that. So that's where I say, I don't mind missing out on a trade or two, folks. I don't cry over spilt milk. There's always going to be another trade. There's always going to be another day. Market's not permanently closing. I knew that before I took off work Thursday at the end of last week, right? I knew coming back today I'd be good to go. So it's a matter of when and where, right? And with that, all right, well, if consistently we are not really on the ball, if we're consistently missing out on move after move after move, let me know. Let me know. I am more than here to help. That's my job. So, obviously I got to jump on a coaching call coming up at 12 o'clock here, 12:30, 1 o'clock afterwards. So probably be chatting with a few students with that coming up. But again, hey, here's ALT making this little push over 14. Let's see if there's more coming up here on this trade on the way up to 15 big resistance. Now, folks, hey, we're going to finish up Traders Talk for right now. So for any of our, new trial members, at least Octavia, Mint, Tim, we have a few of us just joining us here. I saw Richard before, Daniel, Brent. Yeah, if you have any other follow-up questions, feel more than free to private chat me. You can always email me here, josh@c2trading.com. But otherwise, actually, if you see my last post in the trading room, see my thumbnail there, my ugly mug showing right there at least. See the three dots to the right of that. You could actually select that and select private chat. Left-click those three dots, select private chat. You can instant message me throughout the day inside our live trading room. If you're on YouTube right now, hey, email me. I just put my email address right there on the lower left, josh@ctutrading.com. If you're interested in joining our live trading room, just scan that QR code on the top left of the stream. Get you a week-long live access to our live trading room. Myself, Fausto, 35-plus year pro within the stock market there. We're trading all throughout the day. We do audio broadcasts in the morning, throughout the afternoon. So we'll be back on later at 2:30 simulcast. But then, hey, at 3 o'clock, we'll be back on for a full hour of audio commentary and just heading into the close. So I look forward to seeing everyone there coming up. Talk to you soon.